Hello everyone, and welcome to my review for Jujutsu Kaisen chapter 232. This was a pretty good chapter this week with a few important things to discuss, but before we get into that, as always, if you haven't already, definitely be sure to like and subscribe. I'd like to try and hit at least 100 likes on this week's reaction. Now then, without any further ado, let's get right into this week's chapter, shall we? So, I would say there are about 4 things to discuss. Yeah, 4. And we'll go through them in chronological order. First up, what exactly is the mechanism behind Maharaga's adaptation? The impression that we had last chapter, was that Gojo only had 3 more chances to hit Sukuna with his curse technique before Maharaga would adapt. And maybe that would mean that, there's like 2 or 3 more chapters left in the fight. But we go through all of those spins this chapter. And the first of those spins happens when he's not even getting hit by Infinity. So Yuji raises the question of what is the exact requirement for Maharaga's adaptation? Is it time or is it experience? Does he only need a certain amount of time after experiencing a phenomena once in order to adapt to it, or does he need to experience it multiple times before he can adapt to it? Based on the wheel turning, as it was described last chapter, we thought it was experience that was required, but now it seems more like it's time that's required. After Maharaga experiences something, they need a certain amount of time to adapt to it, and once that time is completed, they're good. They're immune to it, but in that time period, they can still be affected by it. I don't know if getting hit by it more would speed up the adaptation or not. That's not really gone into. That could be a possible factor, but there doesn't seem to be any overt indication of that, so who knows. And that does make sense, because I'm pretty sure Maharaga was able to adapt to Dismantle after only getting hit by it once, but there was kind of a bit of a gap in between the first and the second time that it was launched at him. I also wouldn't be surprised if the complexity of the phenomena increases the amount of time required for adaptation. That wouldn't shock me. But that makes the situation more dire for Gojo, because in that case, it's not, you only have 3 chances, it's you only have so much time until the 3 spins are completed. So Gojo's just using a mix of CQC and curse technique combat, and we get some pretty cool applications of both blue and red, having a bunch of tracking orbs for blue that just seem to crush everything that they pass over into dust, and a very interesting application of red. But that's where we get into the second thing to talk about this chapter. Gojo tries to surprise attack Sakuna with a use of Curse Technique Reversal Red, but he minimizes the damage by using Domain Amplification, which stops Maharaga's adaptation momentarily, but spares him most of the damage from the attack. Not all of it, but he does minimize it. Now, the confirmation here that Domain Amplification can be used to minimize the damage from Curse Technique attacks, and, specifically Infinity, I think this confirms how exactly Sukuna survived the 200% Hollow Purple. We're wondering, what exactly did he do for that? And what seems quite likely is he stuck out both of his hands and then used Domain Amplification to, I would assume, the greatest extent that he can, and just nullified as much of the damage as possible at the cost of at least one of his hands. I wouldn't be shocked if both of his hands got destroyed by it, but the other one was healed by the time we see him again. So yeah, I guess that is a way that you can survive Hollow Purple, but given that even Sukuna took fairly serious damage, I consider limb loss to generally be fairly serious damage. Most characters would not be able to do that. They would not be able to pull off some shit like that. So that's just a thing Sakuna can do because he's Sakuna. Now, the thing is with this usage of red is that Sukuna thought he was just trying to hit him with a surprise attack, and that it seemed like he was only going to use blue. And he thought maybe Gojo was upset that his hand was red, but as it turns out, Gojo kind of fired off red in a bit of an arc in the circular structure that they're in. So it just sort of curved back around behind Sukuna and struck him in the back, sending him flying forward into Gojo's fist, which lands a black flash. The first black flash we've seen in 100 chapters. The last time we saw Black Flash was chapter 132, when Yuji used it to finish his fight with Mahito. Fun fact, that is still my favorite chapter in the series. I consider it to be the best chapter reaction I've ever done, which is kind of sad because it was like the second one. That reaction was responsible for, a lot of people subscribing to the channel, a lot of people joining my Discord server. You could say that chapter is responsible for my channel and my Discord server being in the state that they are now. So that chapter means a lot to me, and it's really mind-boggling that was 100 chapters ago. God. Time sure does fly, doesn't it? Well, anyway, it's sick as fuck that Gojo landed a Black Flash against Sukuna here. It would probably be kind of weird if this fight, of all fights, didn't have a Black Flash in it. And I mean, when else are you gonna bring it back after this fucking long? Especially since Gojo is someone who we know has experienced Black Flash, and he's supposed to be the best at everything. So you gotta see Gojo land a Black Flash at least once. I'm mildly disappointed that Gojo landing a Black Flash doesn't blow a hole through Sukuna, but, you win some, you lose some, because you get everyone's reactions in this one page, and Yuji is the one that recognizes Black Flash, says what it is, and he's the Black Flash guy, so very pleased that my boy is the one to call it out here. And then the other really funny thing is that Sukuna is knocked unconscious by this. I don't know how people want to cope their way out of that, but his eyes have gone white. They've rolled back into his skull. He's hunched over. Blood is dripping out of his mouth, and the wheel falls off of his head. The man has lost consciousness. Standing up, albeit, but he got knocked the fuck out. So let's just say it again. For the people in the back that, for some reason, just can't seem to accept this yet. Oh. Yeah. Gojo is stronger than original Sukuna. If he didn't have 10 shadows, he would win. If he didn't have 10 shadows, if Sukuna had not taken over Megumi's body, Gojo would have won back during their last domain clash. He would have won then, because Sukuna would have been killed by Unlimited Void, would have had no counter to it, and he would die here, because, you wouldn't have a giant super cracked top tier Doomsday Shikigami jumping out of the shadows to attack Gojo. He would be done. He would be finished. I don't give a shit what his real technique is. If his real technique is so cracked, he would have used it by now. He wouldn't need to use Maharaga like this if it would win him the fight. You get what I'm saying? If whatever he hasn't used yet would win the fight for him against Gojo. He would have pulled it out. Anything that's part of his original power set, that's not whatever Yorozu gave him, because that's also like a new thing, presumably. And even if it's a recreation of one of his original tools, I'm kind of iffy about whether or not I consider that to be part of original Sukuna, because Gojo's not using any tools here, so yeah. Cope, sieve, mauled, do whatever you want, Sukuna fanboys. I love Sukuna, and let's not get it twisted. Original Sukuna, based on this fight, is still like top 2 in the verse. So it's not like he's a shitter or anything, but it's just, between the two kings of their respective eras, Gojo is the strongest. It's that simple. Him taking over Megumi's body and getting 10 shadows here is a way for Sukuna to be able to win the fight and still be able to say Gojo is the strongest, with like a little asterisk saying, but Sakuna buffed himself through unnatural means. Now Maharaga's showing up here, and cutting Gojo is obviously bad. This is not a fatal wound to Gojo. I mean, we all understand this. I don't know how getting attacked by a positive energy weapon would affect a sorcerer. It annihilates curses instantly. It didn't really seem to have that much of a negative effect on Sukuna, outside of just being a strong attack. So I don't imagine it will be too negative against Gojo. Other than, it's a giant sword cutting his chest open. But that's not really the big problem. The big problem here is that Maharag is now presumably immune to pretty much anything Gojo can pull out. At least, in terms of his curse techniques. I doubt he's adapted to his physical attacks, because I don't think that's really what Maharaga was being used to adapt to. And I'm also going to assume he can only adapt to one phenomena at a time. So, he was doing Unlimited Void first, then he was adapting to Infinity on the whole, so if Gojo can only use his physical attacks on Maharaga, that would presumably be a separate thing he needs to adapt to. So how does Gojo get out of this one? Well, if Maharaga hasn't adapted to physical attacks from Gojo yet, that would really be his only out. Alternatively, this is when Kashimo has to enter the scene. I wouldn't be shocked. No pun intended. But, Maharaga showing up like this, being adapted to Infinity, that's kind of the win condition for Sukuna. Unless he can just pull out some new insane thing. Gojo just makes up a new thing to do. Which is, he's Gojo, so I wouldn't be shocked if he could do something like that. But with what we're aware of right now, that's gonna be it. So yeah, gotta have Kashimo show up like next chapter, and see what happens. I don't know if I'll consider next chapter the end of the fight or not. Like if basically Gojo tags out willingly, or other people show up and they say, "Hey Gojo, take the bench right now." I have no idea, but I feel like I'm probably just gonna consider this whole big protracted fight against Sukuna to be one fight. In which case, it's probably gonna be the best fight in the series. I just did a stream last weekend talking about really all of the fights in the series, and then this one specifically. Currently, what I think is gonna happen is Kashimo's gonna show up, he's gonna use his technique, he's gonna beat the shit out of Sukuna, and then he's gonna die. Because I imagine his technique will cost him his life, or he'll just expend it and won't kill Sukuna. It won't be enough, and then Sukuna's just gonna kill him. But after fighting Gojo for this long, and then having to fight Kashimo, he's gonna be so worn down that you can have Yuji show up and get his fight against Sukuna. Bring Sukuna down to Yuji's level, because the fights with Gojo and Kashimo are cool and will be cool, but they don't have the same narrative weight as, say, Yuji's fights against Mahito. That dynamic has not been matched since. Yeah, it has not gotten better than then, since that's been over. Sukuna is the only antagonist left that has that sort of dynamic with Yuji. Or really any of the protagonists, in all honesty. Not to mention, he is possessing Yuji's friend, so he should be the one to show up, and probably use that soul-swapping thing to get Sukuna out of Megumi's body, and maybe back into his body. I think that sounds honestly really reasonable. Gege will probably do something totally different, like he's been doing for a lot of this fight. But much like with this fight, I imagine it'll still be pretty narratively satisfying, even if it's not what we expect. But, as per usual, we're just gonna have to wait, find out what happens next. Because with that, that's all for this week's chapter, and that's all I got for this week's review. If you guys enjoyed, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss any of my uploads. I do Jujutsu Kaisen chapter reactions and reviews every week that we get a new chapter. If you enjoy discussing Jujutsu Kaisen with other people, or just enjoy the content I produce on this channel, I highly suggest you check out my Discord server. I have a link to that down in the description. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys around. Take care.